The day of my father's funeral felt like a dream I couldn't wake up from. The air was still, the sky too blue, the birds singing as if nothing had happened. That felt wrong. Nothing should be singing when someone like my father is gone. People filled the church pews, some crying quietly, others sharing old stories with soft smiles. I sat in the front row, my hands clenched together, barely listening. But what caught my eye the most wasn't the casket. It was Emily, my stepmother. She stood near the altar, dressed in a simple black dress, her blonde hair tied back, her face calm to calm. No tears, no shaking hands, just silence. Cold, heavy silence. And something in her eyes that made me uncomfortable. She wasn't broken. She wasn't even pretending to be. Emily had been in my life since I was 17. She married my dad 2 years after my mom died from cancer. He met her through work. She was a marketing consultant who helped him turn his small construction business into something bigger. She was smart, beautiful, about 10 years younger than him, and for a while, I think they were happy. But she never tried to be a mother to me. She was always kind, polite, distant. The type who smiled with her lips, not her eyes. I didn't hate her, but I didn't trust her either. Not fully. Still, she was part of our lives. She became Emily instead of Miss Callahan, and after a while, it just was what it was. After Dad's death, I didn't return to my apartment in Chicago. I stayed at the house. Didn't feel right to leave her alone. That's what I told myself, at least. Maybe part of me just couldn't let go of everything yet. I thought Emily would cry, scream, maybe shut herself in her room. But she didn't. She stayed busy, too busy. She cleaned everything, scrubbed the kitchen, dusted old photo frames, donated my dad's clothes before the week was even over. It felt ... off. Like she wasn't mourning, she was erasing. At night, the house felt too big, too quiet. I'd find her sitting in the living room alone with a glass of wine, staring at the fireplace like it held answers. We barely talked. Just small things. Did you eat? Want coffee? But one night changed everything. I walked past my father's home office and saw the door slightly open. Emily was inside, sitting on the floor, surrounded by boxes. Her back was to me. She was holding a photo in her hands, one of her and Dad at the beach, back when they were still glowing. Her shoulders were trembling, and at first I thought she was crying. But when I stepped closer and asked, "You okay?" she didn't flinch. She turned her face toward me slowly. Her cheeks were dry, but her eyes looked empty. "He never really loved me," she said softly, like it wasn't meant for me to hear. Not in the way I needed. I didn't know what to say to that. What do you say to a woman mourning a husband while questioning his love at the same time? There was pain in her voice, but also something else. Regret. Bitterness. Maybe both. I sat down beside her on the floor, unsure of what I was doing. But in that moment, we weren't stepmother and stepson. We were just two people in a quiet house, both missing the same man in different ways. That night was the beginning of something neither of us expected. She didn't touch me. I didn't touch her. But something passed between us, a look, a weight, a feeling that made my heart beat faster and my throat tighten. I noticed things I hadn't before, how the light caught her hair when she leaned forward, how tired her face looked without makeup, how lonely she seemed, even when sitting in the same room with me. For the first time, she wasn't the distant woman my father had married. She was human, flawed, vulnerable, and heartbreakingly beautiful in a quiet, sad way. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about her words, her face, the sadness buried so deep in her it felt like it had its own shadow. I told myself this was grief, just grief. But deep down, something else was waking up inside me. Something warm, dangerous, forbidden, and I think she felt it too. The days started blending together after that night on the floor. Emily and I never talked about what she said in Dad's office, but something between us had quietly shifted. It was like an invisible wall had fallen down, and now we saw each other differently. She wasn't just my stepmom anymore. She was a woman, alone, hurting, and trying to hold herself together. And I wasn't just her stepson. I was the only person left in the house who saw her every day, who knew how much she was pretending. She stopped wearing her wedding ring. I noticed that first. Then came the little things. She started making 2 cups of coffee in the morning instead of 1. She began waiting for me to get home from grocery runs so we could unpack together. At night, she'd sit closer to me on the couch. Close enough that our arms would touch. Barely, but enough to notice. Enough to feel. One evening, it was raining hard. The kind of storm that makes the whole world feel quiet. We stayed in, drank a little wine, and watched an old movie. Something from the 90s. Dad used to love those. At some point, we started talking. Really talking. For the first time. She told me how lonely she'd felt in the marriage, how my father had grown cold. In the last few years, not cruel, just distant. Like a man who had already made peace with a quiet kind of life. He stopped touching me 2 years ago, she said, her voice low, her fingers wrapped around her wine glass. He stopped seeing me like a woman, just someone who cooked dinner and paid bills. I didn't know what to say, so I just looked at her. So when she looked at me, there was this long, dangerous pause between "oohs too long." Then she whispered, "You remind me of how he used to be when we first fell in love with me." That was it. That moment. It's that crack in the wall that opens something too big to close. I leaned in, or maybe she did. I honestly don't remember who started it. But the kiss happened. Soft, hesitant, but real. Her lips were warm, her breath tasted like wine, and when she pulled back, she didn't look shocked. She looked like someone who had been starving and just got her first bite. We didn't say anything afterward. She stood up and walked away. I sat there for a long time, heart pounding, thinking about everything that kiss meant, what it could destroy. But the next night, it happened again. And again after that, it became something we didn't talk about. In the daylight, only acted on when the house was dark and quiet. We'd sit on the couch watching shows we didn't care about, hands brushing, bodies leaning closer, until we ended up in her room or mine, tangled in sheets and silence. It wasn't just sex, it was comfort, release, confusion, and something deeper. Something that scared me during the day. Emily was still Emily. She'd make coffee, clean the house, do laundry. I'd help her around the yard, fix the leak in the garage, take care of the mail. We acted normal. But underneath it all, there was a heat, a tension that followed us everywhere. A look across the table, a soft touch on the arm, a quiet breath. When we passed too close in the hallway, it was wrong, so wrong, but it felt too real to stop. One morning, I woke up in her bed, sunlight spilling across the sheets. She was already up, sitting by the window, wrapped in one of Dad's old shirts. Her legs curled under her, coffee in hand, staring out at the trees. She looked peaceful, almost happy. And that scared the hell out of me, because in that moment, I realized something. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to go back to my apartment in Chicago or return to my old life. I wanted to stay in this strange, broken little world we had created, where nothing made sense, but everything felt alive. But I also knew it couldn't last. We were living on borrowed time inside a house full of memories, wrapped in secrets that would one day come crashing down. Still, we kept going, because neither of us was ready to stop. Not yet. It was a Saturday afternoon, quiet and gray outside, the kind of day that makes you want to stay in bed. Emily was upstairs napping, wrapped in my hoodie like it belonged to her. I had gone down to the garage to find a tool for a loose cabinet door. And on my way back, something made me stop at Dad's old office. I hadn't gone in there since the funeral. Not really. I always felt like I was trespassing in his world. But that day, something pulled me in. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe guilt. Or maybe some part of me knew what I was about to find. The office still smelled like himmeled spice, ink, and dust. I moved some books aside from the shelf near his desk, looking for a screwdriver. That's when I noticed something strange. A tiny gap at the back of the shelf. A hidden panel. I pressed it gently, and it popped open. Inside, there was a manila envelope, thick and sealed, with one word written on the front in Dad's handwriting: truth. I wish I hadn't opened it. Inside were letters, more than 20 of them. Some typed, some handwritten. All addressed to Emily, but they weren't from Dad. They were from someone who signed every note with a single initial D. My stomach turned as I started reading. The first few letters were passionate, romantic, emotional. They spoke of stolen weekends, late-night calls, and dreams of a different life. They were filled with things like, "I can't stop thinking about you," and "he doesn't deserve you." One letter had a photo tucked inside dimmily and a man I didn't recognize, holding hands on a beach. I flipped the photo over. Santa Monica, 2017. It wasn't just a fling. It had been going on for years. While my dad was alive. We were eating dinner together like a normal family. And then came the final letter, the one that hit me like a punch to the chest. It was dated 2 days before Dad's accident. The man wrote, "After this weekend, we leave. I can't wait anymore. You've promised." That was it. Everything I thought I knew about Emily, about my dad, about us, was shattered. I sat there for a long time, the papers in my lap, my heart racing. I felt sick, angry, betrayed, and most of all, ashamed. Shamed that I had fallen for a woman who had lied to my father. A woman who had been planning to leave him while he was still loving her the best way he knew how. I didn't want to believe it, but the truth was in front of me, written in her own words: "I love you. D, I want a new life." That night, I waited until she came downstairs. She walked into the kitchen barefoot, hair tied up, wearing one of my old flannels, like it was normal, like we were a couple. I dropped the envelope on the table. She froze. "What is this?" I asked, even though I already knew. She looked at it, then at me, her face drained of color. For a second, I saw the real Emmeline, the strong, graceful woman she pretended to be. But the scared, guilty one hiding underneath? "You found them," she said quietly. "That's all you have to say." She sat down slowly, her hands shaking as she opened the envelope and took out the letters like they were made of fire. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she whispered. "I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. Just stared at her." "Was the accident even an accident?" I asked, my voice low. Her eyes filled with tears. "We had a fight that night. The night before he died, I told him I was leaving. He got in the car angry. I told him not to. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't high. He was just done. It felt like I couldn't breathe. Everything in the house, the furniture, the pictures, the scent of her perfume, suddenly felt poisoned. "So you just moved on?" "It's me." "No," she said, her voice breaking. "Wasn't like that. I didn't plan it. You were there. You saw me. You listened." I started to feel again, but I never meant to. She stopped herself, looked away. "I don't know who I am anymore." And in that moment, I didn't either, because as much as I hated her for what she did, still wanted to reach out, to hold her, to believe that somewhere under all the lies, there was a woman who had loved and lost just like me. Asterisk, the house didn't feel like home anymore after that night. It was like the walls had heard everything, every lie, every secret, every kiss we shouldn't have shared. Emily moved through the rooms like a shadow, quieter than before, her eyes red, but not from crying. I didn't sleep in her bed again after I found the letters. I stayed in my old room, staring at the ceiling most nights, listening to the soft creaks of the house and wondering how love could feel so good one moment, then so wrong the next. She tried to talk to me once or twice, but I couldn't bring myself to say much. I was angry at her, at myself, at my father for not seeing it. But underneath all of that, I was still aching for her. That was the worst part. Even after the truth, I still wanted her. I still loved her in this complicated, painful, twisted way that didn't make sense but felt too real to ignore. A week later, I told her I was leaving, back to Chicago. back to a life I wasn't sure I even wanted anymore. I found her in the garden, pulling weeds with her bare hands, her knees in the dirt. She didn't look surprised when I said it. She just nodded, kept her eyes down. "I knew you would," she said. "You should." I waited for her to ask me to stay. Part of me even hoped she would. But she didn't. She just stood up, wiped her hands on her jeans, walked past me without another word. That night she left something on my bed. A small box. Inside was my father's watch, his favorite one, with the leather strap worn down. From years of use and a folded note in Emily's handwriting. "He loved you more than anyone. Don't ever doubt that. I failed him, but you didn't. I'm sorry for everything." It was short, simple, but it broke something open in me before. I left the next morning. I stood at the doorway to her room. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at her hands like she didn't know what to do with them anymore. I wanted to say something, to end it on something more than silence. Was any of it real? I asked her. She looked up at me. Slowly, her eyes shining with tears. "Every moment with you was real," she said. Even if it wasn't right. That was the last thing she said to me. I drove away with my heart heavy, my mind full of Hertha. Way she laughed when she let her guard down. The way she touched my face like I was something fragile. The way we held each other like the world didn't exist outside those walls. Didn't feel like a clean goodbye. Felt like unfinished music, something that would echo in both of us for a long time. Back in Chicago, I tried to pick up the pieces. I got back into work, reconnected with old friends, tried dating again, but nothing felt the same. No one looked at me like Emily did. No one made me feel both lost and found at the same time. Sometimes I'd open my drawer and see Dad's watch. I never wore it, but I kept it close, like a reminder of everything we went through, of what I learned. Months passed. Then, one evening, I got a letter. No return address, just my name on the front. Inside was a photo Emily standing by the ocean, wind in her hair, smiling like she'd finally found peace. On the back, it just said, "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible." That was it. She was gone, but she was healing. And maybe I was too. I'll never forget her. Not what we had, or how we got there, or the way it ended. It was a love, born out of grief and need, out of secrets and sorrow. It was wrong in so many ways, and yet it was real. Messy, human, painful, and real. And sometimes that's the kind of love that stays with you the longest. It's the one you can't keep, but can never quite let go.